We're being joined by Ehtesham Shahid from Dubai. Mr. Shahid is the editor at the Emirates Policy Centre. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. Also joining us to mention is our senior principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, who's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us as well. Sir, coming to you first, there's an emergency meeting of OIC nations that's taking place in Jeddah. What sort of a response can we expect from the Arab bloc?
Well, to begin with, they're trying to consolidate resources to come up with a common front as far as this this most recent escalation is concerned. It's taken a lot of people by surprise, the intensity of it. I mean, nothing in the Middle East is a surprise in the larger context, but the escalation was expected to an extent, but there was also a sense that there would be some preparation for ground offensive. There's a lot happening on the diplomatic front that will have an effect, and at least humanitarian corridors would be open. But that hasn't happened. This last night's strike on the hospital hasn't helped matters. So it's going to be very difficult for Arab capitals to come up with a common strategy to respond to the needs of the time.
Right, absolutely, sir. The Gaza Hospital tragedy sent shockwaves across the globe with the condemnation, of course, I'm sure you must have seen pouring in from all sides. This happened as US President Joe Biden, of course, is paying a solidarity visit to Israel with the aim of negotiating peace in the region. The blame game has begun. What's your assessment of the situation?
I mean, the first casualty in any conflict of this kind is truth. So blame game has to happen. Now you'll have to understand the context in which this entire thing is happening. If you have a strip which is besieged by all sides, plus you have groups such as Hamas and Islamic Jihad operating, then it becomes difficult to figure out what goes wrong where, especially in a situation where a build-up has been happening for an assault. Now, prior to that assault, Hamas staged a lot of rocket attacks, so it's easy for the Israelis to blame one of these on them. But then if you look at it rationally, you would say, okay, if they're firing rockets, why would they fire it on a hospital rather than across the border into Israeli territories? So you have to take one word over the other. So it's still unclear what really happened. But then it depends on who you talk to, and if you talk to the Arab side, they would say it was the Israeli attack that led to the massacre of people in that hospital. So early days yet, but the next 24 hours are going to be important with Biden coming in and hopefully with Egyptian support, some humanitarian corridors being opened and things being stabilized for now. But this hasn't helped. What happened last night hasn't helped.
Right, sir. So do stay on with us. Siddhant, coming to you for now. Of course, the situation remains volatile. What can you tell us of the ground situation? Of course, as we discussed earlier as well, it's not common for the US president to go into an active war zone. So also take us through some of the measures that have been put in place for that.
Well, I'm here in Tel Aviv, and this city will see the visit of the US President Joe Biden in few hours from now. Around 12:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, the US President lands here and he meets the Prime Minister and the President, and also is expected to meet the family members of the hostages. But essentially on ground there is a lot of anger when it comes to the Israelis. The terror attack on Israel is something that has shaken the country, and there's heightened security on ground. We have been to southern parts of this country where the terror attacks happen, and we have seen how there have been true build-up, the movement of the tanks as well. But essentially for the Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is a make or break moment. He is seen as a person who is a strong man, who is having a strong man image, and essentially when it comes to he being seen laxed, that means a political suicide for him. So he would, of course, do something big. That is a lot of pressure on him. But essentially, he has to deal with the global geopolitics as well. The fact that the US president is traveling here to Tel Aviv, he will be trying to soothe concerns. But given how volatile the situation is, nobody knows which turn it takes.
Right. And now, Mr. Ehtesham Shahid, coming back to you, there's anger across streets in the Arab world. We're seeing attacks on Western embassies. How are Western allies in the Arab world grappling with the outrage?
Well, they have to find a response to the situation, and the problem is if they can't be saying one side, choosing one side over the other in a conflict as complex as this. So you can't just say, of course, nobody is a friend of the Hamas as far as the Gulf countries are concerned. But when you see a very large civilian population, which has already been under occupation for a long time, being targeted in such a manner, then it becomes difficult for them to find a balancing act. For the international community, the same logic applies. If you are condemning civilians on one side, you have to condemn the civilian killings on the other side, and that's how you find solutions, and that's how you find a ceasefire, and that's how you work towards a long-term solution for the conflict, rather than taking sides. The problem is there are not too many honest brokers in this conflict, and that doesn't help matters.
Right. Well, sir, thank you so much for joining us on WION with your perspective and insights on this.
Thank you.
Siddhant, coming back to you now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, and you mentioned as well, that US President Joe Biden is set to land in a few hours from now. So if you could just take us through the engagements for the day.
Well, at 10 a.m. local time, that's at approximately 12:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, the U.S. President Joe Biden travels to Tel Aviv. He lands here, and then at 1 hour's time, in approximately 1 hour's time, that's 1:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, he meets the Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's expected to meet the family members of the hostages as well. But essentially, this is a solidarity visit. This was expected to be a larger visit. He was expected to travel to Jordan for a summit with leaders of Palestine, Jordan, and with the leaders of Egypt. But that has been cancelled now after the explosion at the Gaza Hospital. So essentially, situation remains very fluid, dicey, and on tender hooks as well. You do not know which direction the situation goes, but the Israeli side is prepared. We have seen troop movements which we have been talking about, and essentially the big worry for the Israeli government right now is the release of the hostages. Approximately 200 of these hostages are in the custody of Hamas, and that increases the worry on Netanyahu government, on Prime Minister Netanyahu. But essentially there is the other side of the story as well, which is the humanitarian crisis which is happening in Gaza, and we have talked about that how this is something that has garnered international concern.
Right. Well, Siddhant, thank you so much for bringing us the latest. We'll of course continue to track all the developments with you there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.